Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing really well and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I can't believe how quick December's going. Christmas is literally round the corner now. But yeah, we're going to be carrying on working our way through this little Robin tutorial using coloured pencils and making it look as realistic as we can, focusing on certain techniques to kind of get that realism really coming through. So we've done probably most of it in terms of like the body. So for part 3 I thought I would finish off the wing. And I'm going to try and keep part 3 a little bit shorter than parts 1 and 2 because I know the previous parts have been like over an hour and we don't always have that time spare. So yeah, hopefully this one will be a little bit shorter and we're just going to finish off that entire wing kind of behind the branch that it's sort of sitting on. So what I'm going to do is pick out the palest colour that I can see in the wing, which is kind of like a creamy yellowy colour. So I'm going to go in firstly with the Naples Ochre Luminance pencil, which I think we've pretty much done for like the orangey bit and the start of this wing as well. It's kind of a good go-to. Also, if your lines, like your initial outlines, are a little bit too prominent and you just want to make them a little bit fainter, then just go in with any kind of regular eraser and just lightly go over some of those lines to make them a little bit fainter. We definitely don't want any of those initial outlines showing through underneath our drawing, if we can help it. So make them as faint as you can without sort of erasing them completely, because we still want to use them as a guide. And then with your Naples Ochre Luminance, I'm just going to very lightly go along the entirety of that wing and basically just fill in all of it really, apart from this really dark section right at the bottom of the wing here. Literally just like that with a really light pressure. I'm also kind of using it on its side to get that flatter surface, because it gives you like a much softer line to shade with, so you can get that kind of even colour and coverage all over the wing. So yeah, just leave it like that and then leave this really dark section, which is like the underneath of the wing that's very much in the shadows, leave that as it is because it's really dark. I've just moved my camera down slightly so you can see what I'm working on a little bit closer up. So the next colour that I'm going to go in with is the shade Butternut, which is another luminance pencil, which is slightly darker than what we've just used if I compare the two. Yeah, the Butternut is just a little bit more orangey, I'd say. So with this you want to repeat the same process, keep your pressure quite light. And what I'm going to do is go over some of these initial outlines that I can just about still see and kind of start to differentiate some of these individual feathers, so we've got a bit more structure to that wing. Like that, and then any areas that look a bit more orangey or like a deeper kind of creamy yellowy colour, just focus on those areas and just add a little bit more colour where they are. So something like that. And then on top of that, I'm going to go in with another luminance pencil. This is the Olive Brown 50%. We use this quite a lot for the top of the wing. You want to make sure it's quite sharp, and then literally just go over the same areas where we kind of differentiated some of these feathers and broke them down into shapes. Now if you look at this wing and the feathers and just basically this whole section that we're working on, the top of the wing is very much in focus and the bottom of the wing kind of loses that focus. It's slightly blurry. So if ever you want to make, you know, have all the attention on one part of the animal, or like just focusing on the face or the front of it, which is super, super detailed, and have the rest of it looking a little bit softer, then the way you can do that is to literally blur and kind of smudge together some of these colours, which I'm going to show you when we kind of work into the bottom or the tip of the wing here, just to get that kind of out of focus effect. It's quite nice to do sometimes, you know, like I said, if you do want to kind of have the full attention on a certain part of the animal and a certain kind of detail. So when you're differentiating these shapes and separate feathers more towards the tip of the wing, you still want to use the flat side of your pencil rather than the really pointy side, because it'll kind of give you a thicker, softer line, which will help to create that out of focus effect. And then I'm just going to bring that back up, so we've got that outline. And then I think I'm going to leave that there with the olive brown 50%. Next up I'm going to go in with the shade Bistro, which is a polychromo, making sure it's quite sharp again, and just start to add a little bit of definition to some of these feathers, and also start to shade where those like subtle shadowy areas are. So we're just constantly kind of increasing that contrast and just defining those feathers as much as we can before adding those final details. at this point, those feathers are looking a lot more defined, but I'm just going to briefly go back in with the shade Butternut to add a little bit more of that orangey colour in and amongst the feathers. Sometimes when you add a colour quite early on, the layers that you add on top of it can make it kind of not necessarily disappear, but you kind of want to bring it back up to the surface again sometimes. So it's perfectly fine to go back in with some of the colours that you've already just used. So you're constantly kind of tweaking everything as you go along. Caran d'Ache Luminance pencils as well are just incredible at blending. So not only are they really good for base layers like we've added already, because they provide that lovely like creamy base to work on top of, but when you get to a certain point and you've added quite a few layers, they just blend really, really nicely, which is kind of perfect for the tip of the wing when we're trying to achieve this sort of out of focus, really blurred effect. So I'm going to leave it like that, I think, with the butternut. So to increase the intensity of those shadows and also add this really dark area just underneath the wing, I'm going to go in with the shade Van Dyke Brown to start with, which is like a lovely like dark chocolatey brown. I'm just going to fill in this area first with a medium pressure. And because we've not added any layers at all to it so far, it's going to pick up a lot of that grain from the paper, which is absolutely fine at this stage because we're going to add a few more darker layers on top and really kind of squash it down to get that smooth finish. But for now, just want to add a sort of light to medium layer just at the tip of the wing there. Make sure you've got the shape of it right as well. I think I'm just going to bring mine slightly more to the left. You want to go over some of these lines where these feathers are kind of separated and make them a little bit darker, really focusing on those shadowy areas to get a bit more kind of structure and depth to those feathers. This is where you want to use more of like the pointy side of your pencil as well, so you can get a finer line and be a bit more kind of precise and accurate with where you put in your lines and your marks. So most of your lines should be pointing sort of down the wing because that's the same sort of direction that the feathers are going in. And they should be starting to look a little bit more realistic now that we've added, you know, that darker shadow. They should have a little bit more depth to the feathers. Remember, when it comes to the tip of the wing, keep everything as soft as possible. So I've just added like a light layer just around this line, just to create that kind of blurred effect, and you can see the difference that it's made already. Next up, I'm going to go in with the dark sepia polychroma, which is the darkest brown that they do. And you want to work into this tip of the wing here, really intensify that shadow. This is kind of like underneath the wing, so it's not being hit by the light at all. So it's almost completely black, really. But I think whenever you're drawing something that's really dark like this, sometimes going straight in with a black can actually just make it look flat. So I think it's important to just build up a little bit of colour, whether that be like a really dark blue or dark brown like we've got here first, and then go in with a black, just so it kind of gives it that slight tint from underneath, kind of prevents it from looking flat. So I'm just using a medium pressure and just building up that shadowy area. And you can see already how that grain of the paper is very quickly kind of softening and smoothing out as we're kind of squashing down the teeth of the paper. And then I'm just going over some of the lines that are kind of like the darkest within the wing. Again, just to increase that depth and those shadows. And then just to finish off that really dark shadow, I am going to go in with the black. And yeah, just add a little bit to really intensify that shadow. But like I said just before, those sort of brown tones should kind of tint it from underneath, so it shouldn't look flat. And then just a tiny little bit in other areas if you need to intensify that shadow further. I'm briefly just going to go in with the warm grey one, and this should also just help to kind of blend everything together, merge those colours into each other, so they kind of look like, even more so, that it's kind of out of focus and really, really blended. We want those lines to be slightly blurred and kind of smudging into the next sort of section of the wing, if you will, especially along the outer edges. We don't want a crisp line at all. So do like small circular motions all the way down to try and get that sort of effect, if you can see. Like that, so you can see how those colours are slightly bleeding and merging into each other, and we've got that really sort of soft edge that kind of gives the illusion that it's out of focus, which is what we want. So I think I'm going to leave that there with the warm grey one. So everything's looking quite dark now, we've got that contrast, but I just want to pull out some of those final sort of lighter, finer details and those highlights. So to do that, I'm going to go in with the craft knife slice tool, which is the best tool to use, especially for feathers, to get all these tiny little lines that's almost kind of impossible to do just by using colour pencils alone, because it is so fine. Basically, if you've not used this before, it's a ceramic blade and it's got a pointy side and a curved side, and for when you're working on like details like this, I'd probably recommend using the pointy side because you can get a finer line. And also it's not really that sharp, I've just been poking my finger on it but yeah, it's not that sharp, but it does get rid of that, like those like top few layers of colour, and almost like reveals the paper underneath, so you're almost in a way kind of etching out some of those colours, but kind of like lightly scraping it off the paper, if that makes sense. Unless you kind of give it a go, it's quite difficult to describe how it works, but basically you're just removing that pigment and you're kind of adding in that detail in an opposite way to usual. So when it comes to feathers, the lines and details that make up the feathers are very sort of linear and very kind of close together, with like the perfect distance between them. So this is where you want to be really accurate, and because we've added quite a few layers of colour as well, it should work quite well. It always works better when you've added quite a few layers and when that paper's kind of completely squashed down, because it's very easy for it to kind of remove that pigment because it just slides off. you're wanting a slightly thicker line, I'd use the blunter side of the ceramic blade. So we've brought in all that gorgeous detail, and we've got those really fine lines in there, and we've pulled out those highlights. So in terms of the contrast, that's now looking really good. I just want to bring in some final little colour variations that seem to have got lost. So I want to bring back some of those little orangey like areas in the wing. So to do that, I'm going to go in with the shade Sanguine. I never know how to say that one. But yeah, there's a little bit of an orangey section here. I'm just going to add a little bit into that area with a medium pressure, and then with a light pressure you might just want to add a little bit throughout the wing just to give it that slightly orangey tint, because at the minute it's still looking quite neutral and there are some areas that look a bit kind of yellowy, like golden. Just a tiny little bit. Like that. And then I'm just going to finish off, I think, by going in with the Beast Tree again, which is more of like a light brown kind of golden colour. I'm just adding any more like subtle shadows or little bits of darker detail in and around the feathers. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave it like that. I'm happy with how that's looking. Don't worry if it's not absolutely perfect to the reference photo. I always think it's just so much more important to get that tonal value in there and get that texture right, like we've done in the tip of the wing, especially with this like out of focus effect. If you've managed to achieve anything like that, then that's really good. So yeah, thank you for watching. Please let me know if you've got any questions by commenting below, and I'll be back very shortly with part 4, which probably will be slightly longer because I want to get all of this like white section of the body done, which is quite a lot of feathers and detail, but we'll see how much we get done in the next part. As usual, I've left the line drawing, the materials list for part 3 and the reference photo in the video description below, so you should have everything that you need to start and kind of carry on through the drawing. But yeah, keep tagging me in all your photos and your works in progress because I literally love seeing all of your work. Please remember to like the video if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe to my channel to see more art related content like this. But yeah, I'll be back very shortly, and thank you so much for watching.